Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Adam Krellenstein. I'm here to talk about Kontor. Kontor is a new meta protocol on Bitcoin for DeFi. And it has a number of, I think, interesting features which defy what people think meta protocols are capable of. I'd love to tell you about that today. As I said, I'm Adam Krellenstein. I've been in the Bitcoin space since really the end of 2013. I guess I bought my first Bitcoin right before that. And notably, I'm the creator, lead developer, and architect of Counterparty. Counterparty was a very, very early, what's now called DeFi protocol, and it had a lot of firsts. It had the first decentralized exchange, it had the first prediction market, it had the first financial derivatives, contracts for difference, it had online trustless peer-to-peer gaming and betting, and it really had smart contracts before Ethereum did. They weren't programmable, but they could do all of these things. And what's interesting is that this was all on Bitcoin. It was all interoperable on Bitcoin. It was all a layer on top of Bitcoin called a Metaprotocol. A Metaprotocol, what is a Metaprotocol? A Metaprotocol is a kind of blockchain protocol that works by really extending the functionality of the underlying L1 by building directly on top of it. So instead of building another blockchain, another chain, another network, you embed data inside of the L1 and then you parse it out of that ledger, out of Bitcoin in this case, deterministically. This allows you to sort of interpret Bitcoin transactions in a way that you otherwise would not be able to do and to add functionality directly to the Bitcoin network. Metaprotocols, unlike many other ways of sort of extending Bitcoin, bridging off of Bitcoin, keep all your value on chain, and they inherit the security of Bitcoin. Really, Bitcoin miners secure the Metaprotocol network, and they're natively fully compatible with Bitcoin. You can use your Bitcoin wallets, your Bitcoin infrastructure, your Bitcoin tooling, all natively with a Metaprotocol. Interestingly, Metaprotocols were first described all the way back in 2010 by Hal Finney, who, if you don't know, was really the second user of Bitcoin after Satoshi himself. And here you can see a post from Bitcoin Talk, that old forum, describing a Metaprotocol. You might not have heard the term. Metaprotocols are out there and they're being used. Some of the most popular ones are Counterparty, Ordinals, Runes, BRC20, which is actually embedded within Ordinals inscriptions. And then there are a couple of newer ones that are coming out recently. Alkanes is an example of a metaprotocol, the one that sort of uses the UTXO model pretty heavily. Interestingly, the very first versions of Ethereum were metaprotocols. And you can see here a quote from Vitalik a few years back saying that that was indeed the case, that he was originally going to build Ethereum and the smart contract system that is Ethereum on top of Bitcoin as a meta protocol. He ended up not doing so because of the op return wars of, I guess, 2014 and 2015. And yeah, and then here we are today. The rest is history. I want to tell you about Kontor. Kontor is a new meta protocol. So I after working on Counterparty back in really end of 2013, launching in 2014, and leading the development of that for about a year or so, I left the blockchain space for about 8 years and then came back a couple years ago, took back up the mantle of developing Counterparty, and have been supporting it. But I saw a lot of interesting things that one could do in the meta protocol space and in the Bitcoin space for DeFi that are not currently possible actually because of technological limitations. Kontor is my attempt to solve a lot of these problems, and it has a lot of, I think, nifty features that, again, you're used to seeing associated with sidechains or rollups or other off-chain solutions. Kontor has interesting architecture which allows for 1 to 2 second confirmations, rich smart contracts using WebAssembly, scalable file storage where the file storage system is entirely on Bitcoin, trustless, decentralized. It allows for very high scalability. You can actually get much better scalability with this meta protocol with Kontor than you can with a sidechain or with a rollup. and all the data is entirely on Bitcoin, which I think is a very important thing. How do we do 2-second latency? Well, the interesting thing is that the question of whether or not a transaction is going to confirm on Bitcoin is actually pretty predictable. You can look at the mempool and say, hey, look, blocks are not entirely full, and these transactions have reasonable fees, therefore they're pretty likely to confirm in some window. 1 block, 6 blocks, 12 blocks maybe. The other interesting thing is that with a meta protocol, you can sort of change the rules. You can sort of have this degree of freedom in terms of just determining how you want to order the execution of your transactions. And the order of the transactions as they are processed is actually the most important thing when it comes to, I don't know, double spend attacks, because that's how you make sure that you actually get the money that you were supposed to be paid. If someone sends you money and then they front run you by producing a new transaction which double spends those Bitcoin, then you don't get paid. So what Kontor adds is a optional layer on top of it using a staking network, a Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus protocol that allows for the creation of an actual effective prediction market on the Bitcoin mempool, and thereby allows for the creation of 2-second confirmations of these transactions. If that network fails in any way, then you just fall back to Bitcoin. The order of the transactions in Kontor is determined by that BFT consensus network, but finality is 100% determined by Bitcoin. If the transactions do not get confirmed on Bitcoin, they do not confirm in Kontor, period, end of story. If they don't, but they are batched and ordered, then you just simply roll back. And so you end up with this really strong economic signal saying, hey, look, this transaction is very likely to confirm. Some people have put money behind it, and it's going to happen in this order. So you can actually receive transactions on Bitcoin, moving Kontor assets, and get confirmation, meaningful confirmation, that it's going to confirm that you're not going to get double spent very fast. And we have other protections for RBF and that kind of thing that's all sort of built in there. There's a user griefing bond, all the things that you'd expect. You can see here on the diagram sort of how the ordering system works. Of course, there are some interesting details there as well. But the security model is Bitcoin finality, period, end of story. Scalability, I think I mentioned, scalability is actually very, very achievable on Bitcoin. The reason that Bitcoin is not very scalable is not because it's conservative or because it's old or slow or something like that, but really because it was never designed to be fast or scalable. The signature algorithm in particular is really very inefficient. You have to produce a new, large signature for every input that is inside of a Bitcoin transaction. And in 2026, we have much, much better solutions for actually producing cryptographic signatures and aggregating them efficiently. So you can have compact signatures for multiple transactions. So we use this signature algorithm called BLS, which is aggregatable, and we've taken it from Ethereum 2.0. This is what's used by the validator set in Ethereum. And we've added this as an optional wallet mechanism, an optional signing algorithm within Kontor. So you can just use your vanilla Bitcoin transactions and Bitcoin wallets and all of that, but you can also embed Kontor transactions inside Bitcoin transactions, multiple Kontor transactions inside of a single Bitcoin transaction, and use a shared signature so that you can get to an amortized, 5 to 8 weight units per transaction, over 100x improvement in throughput and cost, all on Bitcoin, not off chain, not a roll up, not a side chain, just by using a pretty conservative signature algorithm. There are other optimizations we add in there, like compression, wild idea, binary encoding, a registry of addresses, so you don't have to actually use the same pub key hash over and over and over again. With these kinds of optimizations, you can get to very, very high throughput within Bitcoin transaction, within the 4 megabyte block limit. Another major feature of Kontor, of course, is that by virtue of the fact that it is a meta protocol, you can have much tighter integration with Bitcoin itself, with Bitcoin the token, than with sidechains, effectively, or rollups, where you often have to embed a SPV proof verifier inside your system. The fact that you're actually on Bitcoin means that you can actually look at Bitcoin transactions and have those transactions determine behavior of smart contracts on Kontor directly. So we're able to do a actually very simple and direct Bitcoin bridge on Bitcoin into the Metaprotocol, so you can actually have KBTC, right? So you have a one-to-one peg between Bitcoin and KBTC on Kontor, and using optimistic consensus, using the scalability features I talked about, you can actually have very, very high throughput and very low latency for moving in and out of this bridge, much faster than with any more complicated cryptographic system, where you have to worry about all these lockup periods, fraud proofs, et cetera, et cetera. You don't need to worry about any of that. And the way you handle withdrawals is very simple. You just do over-collateralization with Core, the Kontor native token. So that gets you all of the things you sort of need, and it's all very simple and direct and on-chain. Here you can see a protocol for the deposit flow. Kontor, of course, has a smart contract system. This is table stakes in 2026. We have actually a lot of experience on the team building smart contract systems. We worked in the enterprise blockchain space for a long time. WebAssembly is really I think it should be the default at this point. I think it's pretty boring, and I think that it should be boring. Smart contract systems should be boring. Tooling should be boring. It should all just sort of work. And our philosophy around smart contracts is make it easy to use to the point that you don't even think that you're using it. We've been able to engineer some very nice, I'd say, features into our implementation of WebAssembly as a smart contract system, which make it dramatically easier to use even than other WebAssembly systems. In particular, we use the WebAssembly component model, which lets you have really cross-contract module native calls with strong typing, type checking, tooling integration, ID integration, et cetera, all to the extent that writing a smart contract in Kontor feels exactly like writing regular software. You don't have to feel like, oh, okay, I'm writing a blockchain, I'm writing something for a blockchain, I'm writing a smart contract, I have to be super careful about X, Y, and Z. You really can just write it much more like regular software. We have it, this is live today. There's an SDK. We are so far out with Rust support, but really anything that works, that compiles to WebAssembly will be supported. And so we'll be adding additional language support later. You can see an example of what the code looks like there. It's super duper readable. File storage, because if you didn't think Kontor had enough features, there's one more for you. There's a system that we've developed using effectively data availability sampling to create a scalable file storage system. Pay once, store forever, entirely on Bitcoin. This is an interesting complement to storing all of your data in Bitcoin inscriptions, which is sort of how most people do it. There have been over 100 million Bitcoin inscriptions using Ordinal so far. There are major limitations to that. First of all, it outsources data storage to the rest of the Bitcoin network. Secondly, it's still really expensive per byte. Third, it has hard limits on the size of your data, right? You can't store more than 400 kilobytes without going directly to a miner. Then you're capped at 4 megabytes. What if you want to store a 100 megabyte file with Bitcoin? What if you want to use Bitcoin to secure some data that is important to you, that is sizable, and you want to make sure it never, ever, ever goes away and the network is securing it? This provides that solution. And the key is that even though the actual file data is not inside of a Bitcoin inscription, the entire file storage system is secured by Bitcoin. The Bitcoin block hashes are used to generate the seeds for the pseudo-random function that challenges these nodes that are storing your data to make sure that they're always storing that data. If they don't, they get slashed, hard slashed. They'll store it forever. Economic guarantees there that are pretty strong. I mentioned the Bitcoin bridge. This is an important feature that sort of comes with Kontor, and the fact that it's on Bitcoin as a Metaprotocol. It makes it very easy to put a bridge directly on Bitcoin. What this allows for is actually earning Bitcoin on Bitcoin native yield. So you can stake your Bitcoin, you can lock it up with a bridge operator, and then you can use, and then that actually generates Core. That's actually one of the processes that creates Core, the Kontor native currency, is staked Bitcoin. Then you can use that Core to collateralize your Bitcoin bridge, or to delegate the stake to an operator who uses that to collateralize their Bitcoin bridge. And then by staking for a Bitcoin bridge, you earn a percentage of the deposit and withdrawal fees for that bridge. and thereby, which is in KBTC, which is pegged 1-to-1 to Bitcoin. So you get this really, really, really nice closed system where you stake your Bitcoin and then you earn Bitcoin yield, Bitcoin denominated yield directly from that. This is not really otherwise possible. Other Bitcoin staking solutions, they tend to pay out in the native token of that other protocol. They tend to use that to like secure the staking protocol of some other network somewhere. This is all on Bitcoin, and the fees are derived from the Bitcoin bridge. You also actually can get yield in core in the Kontor native token as well, which is derived from other fees for like ordering and transaction aggregation and so on and so forth. But you do get Bitcoin native yield, which I think is a very important thing and has been neglected by the industry to everyone's disappointment. Nope. So where are we today? Kontor is, of course, an open source, freely licensed software suite. It's all on GitHub. The indexer is in alpha. You run it, you run Bitcoin, you run the Kontor indexer, bam, you're using Kontor. There's a alpha block explorer called core.space. Check it out. It's awesome. You can start to use it to interact with like basic DeFi contracts, AMM contracts, token contracts. You can write Kontor smart contracts with the SDK and publish them to Bitcoin Signet, where we're live. Sigil, by the way, is the name of the SDK and the language framework. There's a lot of documentation out there, full specs for all of this sort of stuff that we haven't fully implemented yet, including the optimistic consensus stuff. But it's all coming out very, very shortly. And I encourage everyone to get involved and start building with it. This is, I think, a very exciting way of building directly on top of Bitcoin and extending its functionality and scaling it in a natural native way, keeping really true to what Bitcoin is and letting Bitcoin be Bitcoin, and also supporting all of the other things that people want to do and can do and have imagined doing with blockchains. Thank you.